about this. Let's go into kind of a. This is kind of a broad overview of the of this intro to Vayikra or Leviticus, dealing with Korbanot in general. So yeah, that's by and large what we're going to deal with here. You know, it's not going to be in detail. I've gone over this line by line before, and there's some advantage to some of that. And another day, another time, we may do that. This is going to be kind of more of a broad stroke. And it's entitled Korbanot, obviously, to draw near. So what is Korban, okay, or offering or sacrifice? Korban, while used to express an offering, principally means in Hebrew to draw near. Here's from Strong's Talking Greek and Hebrew Dictionary. It says to approach, causative, bring near, for whatever purpose, cause to approach, cause to bring, forth, near, cause, come near, cause to draw near, go, be at hand, join, be near, offer, present, produce, make ready, stand, take. So principally, you see many times there to near. Okay? So a big part of this word is near. So understanding Korban, because a lot of people don't, a lot of people have no clue as to what it is, and unfortunately it causes a lot of negative notions to the sacrificial system and the book of Leviticus in general. There's certainly, even within Judaism, you speak of Korbanot, there are those within Judaism even who kind of like, no, we don't, that's bad, negative views. And not that that's a mainline view, especially in Orthodoxy, but there are some Orthodox that think they misunderstand a comment by Maimonides, and they think, this sacrificial thing is bad, restoring the temple is bad, and so on and so forth. So where do some of these things come from? Where some of these ideas? So from a Greco-paganism identifies a very different idea of sacrifice and worship, and these ideas are cast onto the Torah. Sacrifices in paganism were often used to appease finite gods who had limited control over aspects of creation. It was a way to stay the wrath of angry gods. Okay? It is not so in the Torah. Elohim has no need for us to give him what is already his. He does not require or need our gifts. The earth is Yahweh's, fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. It belongs to him. The earth is his, and everything in it, including those that dwell therein. Right? So, how do you give someone a gift of something that they already own? You'd be like, you see something, that's a nice necklace you're wearing. I'm going to give it to you. You say, I'm wearing it. It's mine. What are you talking about? How do you give that to me? It's the same thing with God. You say, well, here's this sheep, and I'm going to give it to God, right? And then God says, well, the sheep is already mine. I put it I put you over this sheep. You're tending and guarding it, but you're only giving back to me what is mine. So from an angry God's perspective, the pagan mindset is more like that sheep is yours and you're giving it to this angry God, and now that you've given him something that he didn't have before, he's now appeased. Whether it's the blood he desired or actually the consumption of the beast or whatever it was, he was lacking something, or he was angry about something, and then this made it better. And this is not the Torah's view. Now, there are some verses that may lead people down that way, and if there's time, we'll touch on some of those and explain them. But understand, this is a core understanding that everything belongs to the Creator, and so that view of sacrifices doesn't really work. So is the word offering truly a good word for Korban? When we say offering, is that really a good translation? The English struggles in its attempt to relate Korban. Offering implies something given to somehow turn his wrath. The true meaning, it should be is, not his. The true meaning is to come near. So imagine a fight between a husband and wife, and I often use this analogy when dealing with this. It's no way to imply that husbands are always wrong in any fight, or that they're always at fault in a fight. It's just a simple analogy. So after the fight, husband apologizes and brings flowers, right? This is a fairly classic thing within our culture, that this idea, you see it in movies, you read it in books, and so on and so forth, right? He apologizes and brings flowers, right? And it's really the apology, or really the heart change that leads to the apology, that turns aside the anger. The flowers or the gift, i.e. Korban, are only an expression. In other words, it's not the gift. It's not like, here's flowers, be happy, right? There may be no apology with that. I mean, you may still have tensions, and you just go, here's flowers, stop being angry, right? Does that work? No, it might make it might make her angrier, right? So if you go to God and you say, sheep, here, stop being mad. That works with a pagan god, maybe. He'll be distracted by eating the sheep or whatever, and he'll be happy. But with our Creator, he would say, you could take it back. That doesn't do it. It doesn't cut it, okay?
It's the heart thing.
Right, it's the heart thing. It's the why. The why are you bringing the Korban in the first place? Okay.
Which is why then he said in so many places, I was not pleased with your sheep and your goats.
Correct, yeah. That's why there are a number of verses throughout the prophets where he said, your sacrifices wearied me, right? Yeah, you'd get pretty sick of it too. It would be like, that fight that between the husband and wife keep going on, and he just keep bringing flowers, and she comes downstairs and then goes into the dining room, and there's just flowers he's brought every day, and it's just flowers everywhere, and it's like, these flowers do not fix anything, right? Why you keep doing that? Same with the sacrifices. It's like, oh yeah, exactly. Just like God says he hates these sacrifices because they just keep piling them up, and it's not, the heart has not changed, and so it's not wanted. The gift isn't wanted, right? Yeah, it's not genuine, right? So to further this understanding, we need to see man's life goal is to come as close to our Creator as possible. Bringing an animal to the temple and elevating its parts on the altar to Elohim illustrates our intent to bring our material side closer to Him. Scripture says this, a man who shall bring near of you an offering to God, right? It's from Leviticus 1:2. This is from the Hasidic masters. They say this verse does not say a man of you who shall bring near an offering, but a man who shall bring near of you an offering. The offering must come from within the person. It is the animal within a man that must be brought near and elevated by the divine fire upon the altar. In other words, that verse is not in the Hebrew, literal Hebrew. That's the way it reads. And it's not ordered that way by mistake. It's ordered that way to draw you to a deeper point. And the man shall bring something that's near of him as an offering, right? And so the animal, the sheep or the bull or whatever it is he's bringing up to the temple for the sacrifice is not the real animal that he's bringing. The animal, real animal that he's bringing is the one within him, the earthly side of himself, his flesh, right? The carnal side. He's bringing that near because he knows in order to be close to his creator, that part can't live. As long as that part is in dominant or in control, he can never be near his creator. That part will separate him from his creator. So as he acknowledges this, he brings an actual animal that's symbolic of the animal within him. So that's the real animal that's being sacrificed. And so how can we say that? So why would God give a command like that, right? To make a point. It makes a point. He brings a real animal because God said so. God said so that when man brings a real animal, the man is doing what God said. When the man is doing what God said, he is by definition bringing the animal within himself because he has to do that in order to do what God said. Does that make sense? I'll say it again. God said bring an animal because in bringing an animal, the man would have to be obedient to God. And to be obedient to God, the man would have to deal with the animal within himself first to be obedient to God. So it's just a mirror, it's like a reflection of the same idea. It teaches a lesson. Okay? The sacrificial system was not just simply a slaughterhouse. It was not just a ritual. It had really, really deep lessons that humanity needs and needed. The children of Israel needed that. Why? Well, because the sin of the golden calf showed that they were misunderstanding. It illustrated completely that they were misunderstanding.
And so was that an outward appearance also to show what the animal in yourself?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's layers within that. You have the principle of substitution, right? So the animal dies, right? Because the animal has to die. Not the literal animal, well, though the literal animal, but the animal within you has to die, right? It has to die. And because of sin, sin requires death. And so in God's mercy, the animal is then what dies instead of the person. So you have these layers of substitution and other aspects that go along with Korban. So as interesting, it says in 1:2 of Vayikra, or Leviticus, that a man, that is an Adam, shall bring an offering. Why not the usual word ish, which is more commonly used for man? So why is it specifically, when it says a man shall bring near of you an offering, it could say in Hebrew, it could read this way, an ish, who shall bring near of an offering. A lot of times in the Torah, when it's talking about man, it uses the word ish. Now there are a couple others. You have Enosh, which could mean man, and then you have Adam, which could mean man, and their uses are very specific. So why does it say here Adam? Because Adam means man, but it's also the name of the first man, right? So why does the Torah choose to say when an Adam shall bring near of you an offering to God? Why does God use the word Adam for man instead of the more common ish? To teach us that a person cannot offer to God what has already, or what has not been honestly obtained by him. God is saying, when you bring an offering to me, be like Adam, the first man, who could not have stolen from anyone since he was alone in the world. Now, there are a lot of layers there, okay? We'll deal with some of that. If we misunderstand Korban, man could also try to deceive through bringing ill-gotten or lower quality offerings from the sick or less choice animals, right? So if we're already misunderstanding sacrifice, we may think that we could get away with kind of tricking God, you know? Yeah, I don't know if Cain necessarily thought he was tricking God, but certainly, yeah, if you misunderstand its purpose, Cain did, and he just brings whatever, where Abel brought the best of his flock, yeah, the choices of his flock, right? So are we to be like Adam? However, there is more to this than it seems. Since Adam was initially alone in the earth, from whom could he steal? So if the lesson is to say be like Adam, that's not a very good lesson because he didn't steal. Because who could he steal from? Initially there was no other people until Eve came into the picture, and then they started to have offspring. Then he could have stolen from someone. Well, yes, he did disobey. So when Adam was placed in the garden, he was to work it and guard it. And the word for work being aveda, or obeda, as some may pronounce it. And the sages have connected it to avoda, which is worship, and that is the temple service in particular. In Parkei de Rabbi Eliezer, chapter 12, implies that Adam's work in the garden was his study of Torah and obedience to the divine will. Adam did not need to tend the garden in the traditional sense, since it was only after the fall that it was by the sweat of his brow. The earth responded to Adam of its will freely. In other words, what did it mean that when Adam was in the garden to tend it and keep it? Because when Adam was put in the garden to tend it and keep it, it said God created it. So, and how long was Adam even in the garden for weeds to sprout up or anything? I mean, he wasn't in the garden that long, and it wasn't till after his sin and him and Eve were cast out, then it says, now by the sweat of your brow you'll bring forth, right? So if he didn't have to work so hard, then what was his work? What was he really doing there? And so from this, the sages deduce Torah study and obedience to the divine will. Now, that can some people could get bent out of shape about that. They say, "Oh, well, the Torah wasn't given until Mount Sinai." You could go around all those sorts of ways, and that aren't necessarily profitable. At its core, just to not even get into that argument and save it for another day. At its core, Torah is God's instructions, right? Did Adam have instructions in the Garden of Eden? Yeah, you bet he did, right? So that's Torah. Bottom line, that's Torah. Yeah. So every tree of the garden you may eat except for the one planted in the midst, right? So that's Torah. That's God's instructions to Adam. That contained all of the Torah, really, in a nutshell. Do this, don't do this. There you go. That's the Torah, right? Do this, don't do this. And so when Adam was obedient to the divine will, all of nature responded to him. And that's the implication, freely. Why? Because all of nature was submitted to the divine will as well. And so if Adam's will was doing the will of God and nature was doing the will of God, then everything just did what it was supposed to do naturally. That's the implication.
And isn't that what you kind of teaching too, is that the more we come away from God's word and his commandments, even the earth subjected to the sins of
Humanity has an intrinsic connection to the earth, for sure. Adam was formed from the dust of the ground. And on account of that, they are connected. That's why the earth was cursed on account of Adam from his sin. So, in other words, Adam lived as he put his life over to the divine will, and therefore was in essence a living sacrifice. As it says in Romans here 12:1-2, right? I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Elohim, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto Elohim, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but ye be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Elohim. So in order to not be conformed to this world, you need to be transformed. You do that by renewing of your mind, and renewing it to the Word of God. Then once you know the Word of God, then you'll know what His good and acceptable and perfect will is. It's a little maybe harder to do in practice, but the theory is that simple. And that's what it means to be a living sacrifice, right? By submitting yourself while you're alive to the will of God. So the beginning of verse 1 and the end of verse 2 connect. They're the connecting points. Everything in between is kind of the how of that. Because Adam himself was like a living sacrifice. Thus, Adam's mission was to make himself an offering in his lifetime by his unyielding dedication to Elohim. Accordingly, on the throne of glory, it bears the image of a man, from Ezekiel 1:10. It says that every human being corresponds to the image above, the spiritual man, the idealized self, and ultimate potential. This is the heart of Mashiach, who is the image above, as it says in Colossians 1:15, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. There's a notion that the idea of a heavenly man or God's image through which we reach forth to imitate through our obedience. Man's soul is placed in an earthly body so that he can overcome the challenges of the material life and to raise it up to the higher heavenly self, just as we all have a body and soul in constant struggle, a body versus soul, so too must we struggle to reach that higher self, right? Check, the New Testament talks about these concepts all the time. This stuff that I'm drawing from outside of the quotations from the New Testament comes straight out of Judaism, straight from sources that do not necessarily believe in Yeshua. And so these are Jewish concepts. It's just once we understand who Yeshua is, then we can understand how these concepts relate to him and can deepen our understanding of the New Testament, which basically says the same thing, right? I mean, you're supposed to be renewed into the image of his Son. When one sins and brings a korban sincerely, it is understood that he brings the offering on account of the acknowledgement of his failing. In other words, if someone's actually bringing the korban and they're doing it sincerely, the base implication is that he's acknowledged that he did something wrong and his heart has changed. That's why he's bringing it. Now, it could be understood the other way, that it's like, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what I'm going to do, and I'll just do it and get it over with, and everybody will see that I do it, and they'll know that, I did what I was supposed to. No, that's not the implication, and that kind of person would probably be pretty evident. Nowhere was the priest forced to help someone with their sacrifice. If you think somebody came there with a dour attitude, downcast, complaining, this is my best sheep, and I don't even want to do this stupid thing. You think that priest, well, I got to do my job. No. He could say, go home. You don't get it. Get out of here. Go home. When you figure out what this is really about, then you can come back, right? So it's understood when someone's sincerely doing it, they've already acknowledged that they've done wrong, and that's why they're bringing it, right? The korban is an expression of thanks in a sense, or a gift of appreciation. After the flood, we have Noah build an altar and make an offering of thanks to Elohim for having spared him in the flood. In the binding of Isaac, we have Isaac illustrate himself as a free will offering of thanks unto Elohim. These offerings are not appeasements, but a way of expressing our own inner desire to draw near to our Creator, because our failing created a separation. If there was no gap, we could not have sinned to begin with. In other words, that part of ourselves, that soul, that higher self, isn't really what sins in the first place. It's our animal self that sins. But in order for that to happen, we've had to allow it to happen, in a sense, okay? In other words, when you're in the presence of God, it's impossible to sin. He's infinite light, right? You're not going to sin. So in order to even make any kind of sin, that means that there's something has happened. Something has kind of gone along in that relationship to create a bit of a gap. And this is a lot of what the sacrifices in Leviticus are dealing with to begin with. The sacrifice in Leviticus, we'll maybe touch back upon this as we go through, are mainly done for sins done in ignorance or unintentional and inadvertent sin. They don't really deal with rebellion because that's a whole other matter. There's no sacrifice, there's no animal sacrifice listed in the first 1 through 5, chapters 1 through 5 of Leviticus that will deal with your rebellion. And most Christians don't understand that. Most of these sins actually deal with sins that accidents, things you didn't know and then became aware of, sins done in ignorance, or sins you did in the heat of a moment. The guilt offering is the only one that has a premeditated motion in any sense, and it's really a pretty marginal case with that, such as knowing the truth and not speaking it in a situation. That requires some intentional thought on your part, not to give the proper testimony, etc. But for the most part, they're not done for these things. These things are casual, right? So they're things that happen kind of unthinking. So when you look at it in a relationship, such as, again, a husband and wife dynamic, usually injury is usually caused by either party. Usually, if things are well with the relationship, it's usually only caused by carelessness. You say something, I said that and I wasn't really thinking. I didn't mean it that way, right? Well, why did that happen? Why were you being so careless in the first place, right? Something caused that carelessness in the first place, whether you were too busy, too distracted, minds in other wet places. If you were fully present, fully cognizant, you probably would have known that if you brought that up or if you said it that way, how the other person would take it. Not always. Sometimes we say things, and I didn't know you would respond that way based on how I said that. And again, sin's done in ignorance, not intentional things. That's most of what Korban deals with. It deals with an aspect of relationship. God, I've injured you. Didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Here's a gift. Let me bring my offering. Okay? That's the system. That's its understanding. Now, there are a lot more layers to it as well. With the peace offering, it fed people. With some of the other offerings, again, it fed people. So it's not like in the burnt offering it was wholly consumed, but otherwise, the Levites and the priests, they ate of it. Okay, it was their food. It was their food supply. Okay, so with that basic understanding, I'm going to kind of go through a little bit about the sacrifices and the different sacrifices. I'm going to kind of set them up in a way that's maybe a little bit more understandable and how they work, just to give an overview. Again, this is just about an overview. So the first Korban Olah, or burnt offering, it says, "Let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own free will at the door of the tabernacle of the meeting before the Lord." The Korban Olah is a voluntary offering that is to be completely burnt, and nothing is to be eaten. To offer it, the worshiper brings a male animal without blemish to the door of the tabernacle, or the tent of the meeting. A male or female dove or pigeon can be offered if a person does not have the means to offer a bullock, ram, or goat. The Israelite places hands upon the head of the animal, offering with the acknowledgement that this innocent animal is about to pay the price for his sin. And after that, worshiper asks Adonai, or Yahweh, for forgiveness. The animal is slaughtered. When and what? So it can be offered at childbirth, in instances for a Nazarite or leper. And in those instances, it must be a lamb. It could be offered for communal idolatry. In that case, it's a bull. And for a convert or voluntary, or when the altar is idle, it can be done as a sheep, goat, or cattle. It can be done daily, AM a lamb and PM a lamb. New moon, 7 days during unleavened bread and Shavuot. It's a kid. The 3 pilgrimage festivals. It's a sheep, goat, or cattle. The mincha or meal offering. Zav also describes the duties for the mincha, present or gift, or the meal offering, in which the people of Israel also gave grain offerings. The priest burnt a fistful of chamats of this offering on the altar, and they eat the rest. Often the choicest flour is mixed with oil and salt to make a cake, but it cannot contain leaven or honey. Although honey has a pleasant smell, when it boils it smells bitter and unpleasant when it burns. The offering was to be sweet-smelling, as was the incense offered with it. Salt and leaven represent 2 entirely different things. Salt preserves things, while leaven changes them radically. Leaven is associated with sin, pride, and hypocrisy, false teachings, and worldliness. Various types of grain. Some possible exceptions for animals can be found in Scripture, where an animal was offered in as a mincha. It's usually voluntary and can be personal or communal. Some exception, it was obligatory. Next we have the shalomim, or peace offerings. The shalomim, which is related to the word shalom, is a voluntary offering that expresses a sense of well-being, praise, and thanksgiving, such as when Jacob and Laban made a treaty with one another. This offering is similar to the burnt offering. However, while a male or female animal were acceptable, but not birds, and they are not fully burned as are burnt offerings, but only specific portions of fat and internal organs were placed on the altar. A portion of the shlamim is to be eaten by the priest and even by the one offering the sacrifice. And in fact, it was often used, again, as a communal thing. The peace offering was kind of a feast of sorts. It could be offered with 2 loaves on Shavuot, and that is as 2 lambs. The 3 pilgrimage, voluntary and thanks. It can be a sheep, goat, or cattle. And the Nazarite, I don't believe it's specified what specifically it has to be. Then we have the sham, or trespasser guilt offering, as defined in Leviticus 6, 5 through 7. Details the guilt offering of a ram for the following, which is unintentionally using sanctuary property for personal use, forestalling punishment for one's sin when one is uncertain one has sinned, or for unknown sin, and lying under oath or defrauding a person in regards to a found article, a deposit, loan, etc. For an asham, it does not suffice to simply offer a sacrifice. The funder has to make a restitution plus add an additional 1/5 of the value. It can be offered when one is doubtful of their sin, for theft, a betrothed maid, and that's ram. And for a Nazarite or leper, it's a lamb. And then we have the hatat, which is the traditional sin offering, as we understand it. Hatat are offered for unintentional sins, according to Leviticus 4:1 through 4. Sins due to carelessness or inadvertence. And the status of the defender dictates the class of the hatat. If the offender is a high priest or the whole community of Israel, is considered a more serious transgression because it impacts the welfare of the entire nation. A young bull is required and is burned outside the camp. If the offender is a leader such as a king, a male goat is to be brought. If an individual, a female sheep or goat is to be brought, and for these latter 2 the priests are to eat the sacrifice within the tabernacle grounds. The hatat is also required for the 3 sins of omission, withholding testimony, becoming impure due to interval of forgetfulness, and violating an oath unintentionally. When and what? Communal on Yom Kippur, the 3 pilgrimage with 2 loaves on Shavuot, etc., and it's a kid. For personal sin or variable sin, a kid or a lamb. And personal idolatry, it's a kid. When it's the sin of a king or ruler, a male kid. A Nazarite or a leper, it's a lamb. And the anointed Kohen, a bull. So that's a general overview of the sacrifices and what they're offered for. With that said, again, we can delve into some deeper elements with this, which is trying to find my train of thought, is that again, that this idea was to about restoring relationship. And so it only worked with repentance. A person had to have repentance, a change of heart, and bring these sacrifices. These sacrifices were not magical. Okay, just bringing the sacrifice didn't make atonement. There had to be a change of heart as well. And it's really the change of heart that was there. And again, when you look at the way these sacrifices work, it's not the typical negative animal or a negative aspect. And now some people could still be offended and say, well, it's just unfair treatment of animals. And yeah, you're going to have people that are extremists in that front, that such as a vegan who may not use any animal byproducts. The vast majority of the world has no problem with using animals for a cheeseburger or a handbag, a coat, yeah, utilize it, exactly. And so they have these offenses like it's a cruel treatment of animals. From the Creator's perspective, he would say this is part of their purpose when I created them. And in fact, there are commentaries in Judaism that would say the animals even willingly went forth. Why? Because they would understand that this is part of my purpose that I'm serving here in creation. Now again, some people may not be satisfied with that answer and they say, oh, this is just unacceptable. Well, did you create them? Did you make a cow? Did you make a sheep? How do you know their purpose? Who are you to say how what their lives are for or not for? I mean, clearly humanity for some time has consumed these animals and used them again for clothing and for shelter, and this is just one more aspect of that purpose.
Well, the Mashiach himself sacrificed so that Adam and Eve could have clothes.
Yeah, some could say that. So, there in Genesis, yeah. And so, again, there are negative perspectives that aren't they're based off of ignorance is a lot of what they're based off of. And again, these are really important lessons that I think, especially in Christianity, needs today, because they have an incorrect understanding of sacrifice and what it means. A lot of times they think it from just the perspective of giving something up. It's a sacrifice for me to lose this thing. It's a sacrifice for me to give up yeah, maybe, but that's not really a perspective from the Torah or what it's trying to get at. Yeah, you're giving something up that's precious to you. That probably is happening in there. I mean, it's your choicest animals, it's the one without defect, the healthiest, and so on. But it's really not about the loss of something as it is about the gain of something, and the gain is the restored relationship with the Creator. There's a lot more that we can get into, but I think for time's sake we won't. We'll go ahead and close here. But there's just a lot of really good things and lessons that we can learn here. I mean, just simple lessons from things with here in Leviticus. I mean, again, why they have to change these taking out the ashes from the altar gives us just a simple lesson of how every day when they would change out the ashes on the altar every day was just kind of a simple reminder, of simple lessons that every day is a new day. They do it every day. Why? Because every day you start again. Yeah, you messed up, right? Yesterday's sins are taken out, just like those ashes on the altar. It's fresh, right? So yesterday's mistakes, today is a new day. You wake up in the morning, today is a new day, right? Start again. Kind of like the whole Groundhog's Day theme, except for you're not repeating all the same events, or hopefully you're not. Right? You could, if you don't go in with that mentality, you can make all the same mistakes right over again the next day. But guess what? There's still another day until there isn't. And so, hang on one second. So, again, there's a lot of powerful lessons in Leviticus, and so this is just